let me be perfectly clear. Universities are in it to make money too. Trillions of dollars and the hundreds of millions of dollars. Like that's what VCs invest in. You got a simple question, and it's, do you want to be king or do you want to be rich? You can't do both.
Welcome to the So Good to Grow Good podcast, the show where we explore how changemakers and innovators are building sustainable systems for a better future. I'm your host, John Kane Gonzales, founder of Batala, an entrepreneur fascinated by how mission-driven leaders turn ideas into real, scalable impact. Today's guest is Dr. Luis Martinez, Senior Venture Associate at Capital Factory and a key architect of the Texas startup ecosystem. He's a PhD organic chemist from Harvard and the former director of Trinity University's Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, where he facilitated the launch of 65-plus student ventures that raised over $60 million in external funding. But here's what we're really diving into. Why doesn't venture capital invest in social enterprises? And more importantly, what actually works? Luis pulls back the curtains on the hard realities of deep tech investing and the honest conversation about what it takes to build impact at scale. So, welcome to the show, Luis. So excited to have you on.
Thanks so much, John. I'm really excited about having the opportunity to have a conversation with you, dive in a little bit deeper into sort of social impact and how investors are thinking about that in the current climate, as well as wherever our conversation takes us. So thanks so much for the opportunity.
Of course. We had a very amazing conversation over the phone a while ago. But before we dive deep into that, I would love to take a moment just to introduce you and let the audience know a bit about who you are, where you've come from, and what got you into where you are today.
Oh, I've been working with startups and been working with investors now for well over 25 years. It's been an exciting journey. Thanks so much for the shout out to one of my alma maters. So I was fortunate while I was a graduate student at Harvard to have a technology that we disclosed and it got licensed and patented. And so I went through that process as a graduate student. That got me super excited about, startups and technology and how technology can be utilized to kind of help change the world. So I became a management consultant straight out of graduate school, worked with phenomenal management consulting firm that specialized in biotechnology and medical device companies. So I kind of consider that my kind of like MBA. Worked with everything from you guys in the lab rat to publicly traded medical device and pharma companies, providing corporate communications, investor relations, and traditional management consulting. Did that for a couple of years, then went off and became a university professor. So I became a professor of chemistry. But because I wasn't busy enough, I co-founded another management consulting firm that worked with small companies up to $1 million worth of revenue. And that was a lot of fun. That's where I sort of get a lot of my sort of more kind of traditional SMB kind of expertise. We also did sort of due diligence for accredited investors for some technologies coming out of the national laboratories. And so really got to continue to kind of keep that engagement with kind of investors and sort of startups. I closed the company down in 2009. So I understand what the experience is like to close something when no one can afford you anymore. Went off to Florida for a while, then came back to Texas 13 years ago. And thanks again for the shout out for my other alma mater. Became the director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Trinity, helped launch that University Entrepreneurship Center. And it was really through there that our conversation around social impact is actually going to be sort of informed by. So my expertise is kind of founded in that kind of experience in working side by side, social entrepreneurs, social enterprises, as well as more traditional kind of venture scale businesses and small businesses. About 3 years ago, I was fortunate to have an opportunity to move with Texas's most active early stage investor, joined the Capital Factory team to lead our efforts here in San Antonio, Texas. We are investors, typically seed to Series A, sort of where our sweet spot is, and we do engage companies beyond Series A as well. We have over 750 companies in our portfolio, including 8 of Texas's 20 unicorns. And so while we don't have the most assets under management, we don't write the most checks, we write lots of small checks. And so we have real kind of deep understanding, obviously, what's happening in the state of Texas. We've been doing this for the last 16 years in our model and the companies that we work with. But also we have a national footprint and engaging companies throughout the United States. So that's a little on me and a little on us and some of the insight that hopefully I'll be able to provide for our conversation as we chat for the next hour.
I think a little insight is underappreciating all that experience. It sounds like you've got a lot. And one of the reasons I'm really excited to talk to you, I'm just curious, the mention of, what is it now? Trinity,
Yeah.
it wasn't just about teaching entrepreneurship. You actually, in some ways, built a whole center, like pardon the pun, a factory of how to build startups. What was your playbook? How did you get 65 student ventures out the door? And how did you get to raising 60 million in external funding for all these ventures?
So a couple of important recipes, and I'm grateful that I was one of, many people that are working in the university entrepreneurship space, phenomenal colleagues across the country. They're doing great work at other institutions. We were unique in the sense that we were a predominantly undergraduate serving institution. So unlike, the big names, Stanford, MIT, Caltech, like there was no university IP that was driving startup formation. So that's one of the things that made us different. Second, we had no graduate students in the traditional sense. We had a graduate program in healthcare administration, we had a graduate program in accounting, and we had a graduate program in education. But that was it. So again, the kind of like engineers, computer scientists that were like launching kind of tech-based businesses, we also didn't have that kind of, pool of potential student founders. So just generally speaking, it was a different model with regards to who we were as an institution. We were predominantly undergraduate with no graduate programs. The third thing that made us really unique is that we're a liberal arts college. So we have students majoring in history and students majoring in English and students majoring in sociology and students majoring in music. And, what do you do with a degree in English, or what do you do with a degree in music, is a common question many of our students had. And so to answer your question now with that as sort of the framework, one of the aspects of the recipe, one of the ingredients for success is that, I kind of made my bones as a scientist by engaging in undergraduate research. And so it's important for students, particularly, especially at the undergraduate level, to get engaged in the active work of doing the work. And so for scientists, that's doing undergraduate research. For entrepreneurship, it's about building real businesses. It's building real companies. And so we kind of fell on this model that in our center, it didn't matter whether or not you wanted to start a taco truck or a tech company. We wanted you to start your first thing with us. So it was a curriculum and a series of co-curricular programming that was really focused on students like building actual real ventures. It's not about case studies, although they're important. It's not about interning at other people's startups, though that was also an important component of what we did. It was like, go build real stuff. And so every entrepreneurship class had students working on their own ventures. So that's the first. The second, and I'm sure that's part of the topic we'll talk about today, you need more than the it, right? You need more than the venture concept that you're pursuing. It'd be nice to have some seed capital as well. And so we had a venture competition that we provided that kind of first series of funding for students. But it was a staged competition that was sort of part of our innovation in the sense that we're not just going to drop $25,000 or $10,000 or $50,000 on a group of undergraduate students. Because I don't know what your experience was like as an undergraduate, but I know that, I may not have spent all of that $10,000 or $25,000 on my business if I was an undergraduate student when I was an undergraduate.
Yeah.
So, student loans, beer money, right? There's lots of other ways that you can kind of spend
mostly
that
weekend
cash.
retreats, going to weekend retreats and, sabbaticals, we'll call them.
So we staged the funding to where you'd get a little bit of money to kind of start building something, and you'd build something in our summer accelerator program where we went through like a 12-week boot camp and actually focused in building a real business with real, ascertainable traction. And then those selected companies that then got that initial investment, then got additional dollars as the grand prize or as first prize, second prize that they can then apply directly to their business. So that's how it all worked. Like we had this pool of people who were building something for real, and they were building something for real where we brought, 4 of the major components that you need to start something. The first is the idea. And so we had our curriculum and our programming to be able to go ahead and make that happen. The second is a little bit of sort of seed funding to kind of get started. In many cases, like this was so early. This is people that are starting their first thing, their first time entrepreneurs. They're 18 to 22 years old, us, to be that first kind of risk capital. And we provided it as a grant, so it was non-dilutive, and enabled them to kind of get something started so that it wouldn't be in a way in which the university would be on their cap table and lead all sorts of interesting, difficult conflicts of interest. The third thing we brought to the table is that we surrounded them by a group of outstanding, amazing mentors. Some of them were mentors that were alumni that has necessarily built companies. Others were mentors from the community here in San Antonio. Other were companies like across the country that were just part of our network. So we really kind of surrounded them with like incredible mentoring that was really focused on building real businesses on the business side. So these were not like, hi, I'm a student. What do I do with my English degree? I need mentoring as an individual. It was, hi, I'm a student with an English degree, and I think I want to build this company. I need mentors to help me with the business, right? So it was really mentoring focused on sort of the business itself. And then the last part of kind of the special sauce that we brought together is this aspect of kind of the talent. And so it was really kind of connecting these students to other people that were building here in San Antonio, across the state of Texas. It was connecting these students to people who potentially could be their customers, people who could be their potential co-founders, people who could be the potential vendors, people who could be potential hires, and within this sort of student community themselves. And so it really was like these 4 components that kind of came together. And so with this focus on students building things for the very first time, the fact that we were helping them build sort of interdisciplinary teams or teams that involve people that were passionate about some kind of level of value that we're trying to create really created this kind of really special sauce. We started off small. At the beginning, it was kind of like a trickle, like maybe 3 or 4 ventures that got started to where we were touching, over 10% of our student body and various aspects of our venture program. And we were on a regular basis launching at least 5 to 7 companies a year just in our program that kind of came. Successful companies that came out one year led to other successful companies in years past. That inspiration led to other students being inspired. As we kind of built that critical mass of kind of people kind of congregating around that success, it led to additional success. And then some of them, they're legit businesses. They're building real investable companies that either you get interest from, institutional or angel investors that want to back that because they see the opportunity for those returns, or their grant programs and grant funding. So incredibly proud of the team. Thank you for the credit, but it really was our team that pulled together some extraordinary efforts during the decade I was there, and wonderful lessons learned.
So walk me through one specific student venture. How did these 4 pieces actually work in practice?
Many of our students were like, I want to do something that helps people, or I want to do something that has an impact beyond just kind of making money. So being able to kind of walk through and be able to counsel them on sort of best practice on social enterprise, where the current market is and how people are thinking about social enterprise. And it really was during this really great flowering in the sort of 2010s, where a number of institutions, a number of folks were looking at kind of really seeding and growing social impact. And it really was serving as a catalyst and having universities kind of adopt social entrepreneurship curricula, social entrepreneurship competitions. And so that really kind of shaped a lot of our work and working with our colleagues across that network of what best practices were across the country.
Wow. I mean, 10 years definitely gets you a lot of different stories. There was several threads there that was like, as you were talking, that really kind of caught my attention. One thing that you mentioned there is, a liberal arts college or university. Yeah. You wouldn't traditionally think that would be a place for startups. And I think there's a story there about where we find inspiration may not be where you actually would usually think it comes from. We think about tech startups coming from Silicon Valley or from the big prestigious universities or Stanford and MIT, but here's a liberal arts college doing startups. And then another thing I heard was taking theory and moving it to practice.
Correct.
And I remember back being in school, I loved calculus, I loved theoretical physics, but what I really enjoyed was the practical application, applied physics, applied calculus, to see how that actually works in the real world. Going back to that liberal arts thing,
Sure.
I'm wondering, in your experience, because you yourself, you were an organic chemist, PhD, and now you're finding yourself in this VC world. What was that transition like? And I guess you must have experienced that a lot with the students that came through that program, moving from arts to business, let's say.
Just in my own personal journey, a path towards startups or a path in startups or a path in entrepreneurship and sort of a person's career can be nonlinear and kind of a jagged journey and a step forward and 2 steps back and a turn to the right and turn to the left and then 8 steps forward and 4 steps back. Like it's this kind of weird kind of journey. So when you ask like, how do you get from point A to point B? It was a jagged journey, but I think that if you could think about an overarching theme, the theme is, I just like doing stuff, like actual concrete, like let's go make stuff. And it was part of the reason why I became an organic chemist. Like, I could mix chemicals and make something and be like, ta-da! Like that's the world supply, right? And that always, provided a lot of kind of inspiration and insight for me. How that's modified then when I became a professor of entrepreneurship was like, well, let's go help people like build like real businesses and like, they're filing their official incorporation documents. They're building real prototypes. They're providing real services. They've got real customers. They're generating real revenue. You also have to pay taxes. So they're paying taxes on the real revenue. Like let's go build real companies and learn from that experience. And it's really been fantastic in the work that I do now on the venture side to be able to provide both the capital, but more importantly, the kind of advice and effort on behalf of our portfolio companies to help them go big and help them go fast. But the focus is really kind of very tangible, very tactical, like let's go do things. It's not about studying. That's important. It's not about researching. That's definitely important, but it's about doing stuff. Like let's go do things and build stuff. That's what entrepreneurship is. Like entrepreneurship is like, go do it, try it out, see what it is, learn from those mistakes, and then continue to pursue what that process is. So I guess I've kind of followed my nose across those 2 themes, like let's go do stuff and let's go learn from the process and doing the stuff about what to do and what not to do. That's been sort of the theme from point A to point B. And I think that now back to this other framing question you had about the liberal arts, that's so important for undergraduate education just broadly. It's sort of an emerging movement that's been known as experimental education, where we have students actually doing stuff for real. And undergraduate research is a component of that. Internships and co-ops are another component of that that are incredibly important. Then like entrepreneurship, it's got to be either starting your own company or working in someone else's company. And so it was like, how do we get to that for our students? It was like, hey, English major, you're wondering what the things that you can do with an English major. And yes, some of it is, go write, and others are, go get a PhD and go teach, or go teach at a high school or whatever. But there's a whole range of other things you can do. Like, let's talk about what being an entrepreneur looks like and how your deep knowledge and discipline that you may have gained as a history major or as a philosophy major or as an English major can help inform that startup. And yeah, that could also be a tech startup too. That could also be a hard tech startup. That could be social enterprise. Don't think that your venture has to be completely focused in this discipline that you've been studying or are studying for the next 4 years. It can be that training, that critical thinking, that insight can be used to make what you're doing better. And so I'm incredibly proud of our predominantly liberal arts majors, not just our business majors, but particularly our liberal arts and science majors, who went off as, technical co-founders or as co-founders or as first hires or second hires in not only the startups that we launched, but many of the startups that we worked with. And it's remarkable. Like I remember one time we placed in an internship a couple of English majors, and I was talking to our corporate partner who hired them, and they were like, they're amazing. It's like, well, tell me more. It's just like, well, they can write. And like, they can really write. Like, they know how to write like really well. And, they've updated all our marketing materials, and our website looks amazing, and our press releases look super clean. And, like the branding and our messaging, like, they're amazing. We're helping another sort of nonprofit sort of news organization. We had interns in there, hired many of our English majors in entrepreneurship. And it was the same thing. It's like, well, not only can they like write stories, they get what this whole startup thing is all about. Right. So they understand that, yeah, they're there to write and they're there to like to produce the thing that they're doing, but there's also running events, and there's also like helping build a business, and there's like dealing with sponsors and dealing with investors, and like, like ordering chairs, like they understand like the tempo of being in the context of a small organization is trying to figure out what it wants to be when it grows up. And so it was those two elements of what we did that I'm incredibly proud of the program that we've built. We were fortunate. So I started in 2013. We were fortunate in 2021 to be awarded sort of NASDAQ Center for Entrepreneurial Excellence as one of the most outstanding entrepreneurship countries programs in the world. So it was great to sort of have that kind of achievement kind of recognized by our peers for the great work we were doing.
So for the social entrepreneurs who are listening right now, who are building something in education or climate, how do you apply that experimental mindset in a sector where failure is costly?
Your goal as an entrepreneur, and the way that we framed it in talking about entrepreneurship, is you want to create value. And in that aspect of creating value for somebody else, you capture that value. And that's called getting paid, right? So you have the resources to be able to continue to kind of create that value. And by structuring the concept around value, yes, there's economic value to what you're doing, but it broadens that scope to be able to talk about sort of, value for society, value for others, value for your community. So if you are value driven in a way that you want to create value in other ways, you can think about entrepreneurship, which sort of looks a little dirty because it's businessy and it's money and it's investment and it's like the man and you're selling out. Like, how can you think about creating value? And one of the things I'm very proud of the time I spent there is that we knew particularly our artists and our musicians really wanted to have an understanding of sort of how do you make money as an artist or as a musician. And so by framing this aspect around value and distinguishing like what is artistic value or musical value in the value of the work versus like business value or social value, how do you manage to go ahead and not only be the entrepreneur in those spaces to create money for the work that you do, but how are you essentially the startup that creates values for others? So our arts entrepreneurship program that I worked with a phenomenal colleague of mine in the theater department is again another aspect of the success that we had in that program there.
There's a saying that goes like, when man makes a plan, God laughs. And so what we think is our trajectory in life, it often shows us a different path. And it's kind of what I'm hearing here with like people who go to liberal arts and goes into those programs, that you may think that you may just be playing music or something of that nature, but then you may be getting into business at the end of the day. But what I'm curious about, because like you talk about following your nose. So Trinity, from what I understand, has a more like, let's say, altruistic approach to startups. I don't know if I could say that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you're inspiring these liberal arts majors to explore the world of entrepreneurship, to use their knowledge for good or for profit, whichever way it goes. But then you make the move to Capital Factory, which is kind of segueing into, the theme of the conversation. So Capital Factory may be a different setup to what Trinity was about. And how is it different, or how is it the same, Trinity versus Capital Factory?
Well, we're investors. Educational institutions are super important. They have a role. I'm a huge fan of higher education. I'm a huge fan of the work that one does at a university. They deserve our support. They need to be doing the work that they do. But that's a very different outcome than an investor. And as an investor, right, we're all about capitalism. Like, it's okay to make money and you should be making money. And what I think people don't quite understand about VC is, like, from the outside, you see VC funds and it's just like, oh, they're giving me money. It's like, no, we're not giving you anything, brother. Like what we're doing is we're investing in your company with the expectation that whatever dollars we put into your company today is coming back with friends in the future.
Right, 10 times the friends.
At least, right? Like, we'd like it to be at least 10 times, like, that's the goal. And that's where you get this kind of fallacy of, 9 out of 10 companies fail. It's like, no, that's kind of like a VC way of thinking about it. In reality, when you look at the numbers, when you look at all businesses across all different kinds of industry types, it's actually 7 out of 10 fail. Those remaining 3, one is operating at a loss. One is operating roughly at, break even, slightly profitable, sometimes not profitable, kind of average out to kind of break even or a little bit better. And there's only one that's like really killing it. Right. And so as a venture capitalist, if I only get paid when that company grows huge and then exits through a merger or exits through an IPO, the only success for me is the one that's going to exit like at more than just 1x or 2x. And that's that kind of 10x kind of multiple. So that's part of the framework. Like, we're not giving anybody money. Like, we're investing in a business opportunity with the expectation that that company will exit, because that's how we get paid. And that exit happens in a certain time frame, typically 7 to 10 years. And this is where the rubber really meets the road. That exit is so good, that return on that investment is so high that it's better than any other kind of investment anyone else could make in any other vehicle. Because VC funds, we go out and we're raising money all the time. We're raising money from limited partners. These are high net worth individuals. These are family offices. These are institutional investors. And what we say to them is, when you think about your investment portfolio, you've got whatever you're invested in: stocks, bonds, real estate, oil and gas, whatever.
Yeah.
Allocate some portion of that to high return, high risk. And of that allocation of what you do for high risk, high return, I'm going to promise you more than what those other kind of investment types are in kind of like the venture space as a VC. Those exits have to be significant. Those exits have to be huge, because I've promised my investors that they're going to have superior returns.
Yeah. And I think that's, the thesis of this whole conversation is, why doesn't VC money invest in social enterprises? And I think, you talk about outcomes. So, like, going back to Trinity, there were grants. And then with VC money, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a different set of outcomes on a set timeline. And I'm just kind of testing my thinking around this. Like, do you think that maybe like the outcomes for like a grant program is longer term thinking versus a VC program? A grant program was like, hey, we're going to provide grant funding for a bunch of students to try out entrepreneurship for the long-term goal or possibility that they may create a business, not in the next 2-3 years, but maybe further down the line, that it might inspire them or their friends. Versus VC funds is like, all right, the idea has to be viable and it needs to return within the next 2 to 5 years. I'm just throwing some ideas out there, like, as in terms of like the different values of outcomes.
Let me be perfectly clear. Universities are in it to make money too. I mean, I think it's wonderful that, we have this altruistic kind of vision of sort of universities, and they're there for the public good. And yes, that's true. And they're there for education. But, they have a lot of costs they've got to cover too. Money's involved. Money's definitely involved. So this question about is it like purely profit driven or in this other kind of altruistic version? I would say, in one answer to that question, they're both driven by money.
Right. Right.
We live in a capitalist society. It may not be the best system, but you know what? of all the systems that are out there, it's the best. So, until we come up with a better system that kind of drives the kind of prosperity, that kind of drives, how fast and how far we've come as a society, as a species, it's the model we got, certainly the model we got here in the US. That's the model that exists. Right. That's one way of framing it. Let me frame this a different way. There's not a single VC I know that invests in future tech, deep tech, hard tech, frontier tech, that doesn't see a transformative future that is looking at that long term, right? We're investing in companies because we think in the future people are going to space and we're going to have people working on the moon. And we invest in companies because the ways in which we're generating energy needs improvement, and there's opportunities to do cool stuff in energy and create other ways of sustainable energy that's greener, other ways of generating energy that aren't tied or that are limited in many ways by some of the current limitations that we have, or make it more efficient, or to solve the storage problem. So I would argue that investors are also interested in that long-term horizon goal.
Right.
Beyond like, what I can make in a profit. The challenge and the reality is that as a fund, as a VC, I've promised investors they're going to get their money at some point in the future, right? I can't sit there and say, in 30 years, you're going to go get some money. I'm like, no, right. like it's got to be within a window. So there is a focus on those companies that are generating that kind of level of impact and value in that kind of accelerated timeline. And I think that's one of the great big misunderstandings that I think lots of founders, regardless of their social impact or not, have about what venture scale means. The first is obviously market, right?
Right.
TAMs, total addressable markets, they're in the billions of dollars and the trillions of dollars and the hundreds of millions of dollars. Like that's what VCs invest in, is super big, large markets.
Right.
Measured in the hundreds of millions, if not billions. That's the first.
Yeah.
But the second, and this is where a lot of folks kind of get gummed up, even if you understand the first, it's about velocity. It's about speed. It's about doing it quickly. It's about getting there as fast as possible. And sometimes it takes 20 years for us to mature the technology, or to mature the opportunity, or to mature the market. But as an investor, man, I'm going to try to invest in those companies that are going to try to do that in 7 or 5 or 10. Right? Yeah. That's where I'm going to place my bets. And so I think as founders, sometimes they misunderstand that, yes, they've got to go build the thing and build for big markets, but they've really, really, really got to go fast. And unfortunately or fortunately, that pace, that speed, that acceleration is faster now in 2025 than it was certainly 10 years ago. And without any question, 20 years ago when I started this journey. With the advent of our technology, with the internet, with the ability for us to have this conversation virtually, your ability to spin out software, for example, if it's a software component, very quickly with vibe coding tools and AI, or the ability to actually build actual physical products with prototypes using advanced manufacturing, or even the simple fact that most everyone has in their pocket, in their jacket, in their purse or bag, like a supercomputer. Like the transformative power of this machine in everyone's pocket really does accelerate the ability to do lots of things very, very quickly. You are now connected to everyone in the world very quickly, and you have access to all the world's information. So the flattening of those kinds of barriers to entry, or the flattening of those particular kind of infrastructure plays that you need that used to be super expensive, are now accessible to almost everyone. And so you need to be building quickly, which is important. You bring this other question that I think I'll just answer just precisely. You said, why do venture capitalists not invest in social enterprise? Or they don't invest in social enterprise. And I'll push back on that. I'll say, you know what? For those investors that have social impact as their thesis, they invest. They certainly invest. Now, what does that mean? So all investors have a thesis. You invest specifically. I've gone on and raised money from other folks and said, look, I'm going to make you lots more money. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm exclusively going to invest in these kinds of companies. Mostly they're tech companies, software or hard tech, or, I'm investing in robots or space companies or whatever. Like, that's the thesis that investors have. Over the last 20 years, there's a group of investors that are social impact investors that have as their thesis social enterprise. So there are actual investors in VC funds that do invest in social enterprise. There's a lot less of them than there are in everything else.
Yeah.
That's important.
Why do you think that is, though? I'm curious. Like, why do you think that is?
Well, I'll answer that. But hold on. Yes, I'll answer that. So number one, it's a smaller group of investors.
Yeah.
Number two, those investors have gone out and said, look, I'm going to invest in companies that are going to really move the needle. Poverty, climate, human health, across the world, across this region significantly. So you as an investor are motivated to that kind of level of impact. And I'm going to promise you really good returns on top of that. I'm not a philanthropy, which is just about the mission. I'm a social enterprise investor. So it's about the mission and profit. Right. And in comparison to other kind of venture opportunities that you have out there, I'm either going to try to have the same kind of performance, or I'm going to have not as good as the performance, but it's still going to be profitable for you. You're still going to get, a return on that investment, but you're in it because of the way in which we're going to transform maternal health, or the way we're going to transform nutrition across the country. So the reason why I think it's smaller now, to answer your question, is that some of these investors are already doing that work as philanthropists. So they don't want to be concerned about that kind of return and impact on the investment, because it's a pure play about creating social value. So in some cases, it's smaller because some of them are already doing things on the philanthropic side. Others say, you know what, that impact is great. I'm a good capitalist. That impact stuff, that's the role for NGOs and nonprofits. That's the role for philanthropy. That's the role for government. Right. That's their lane. I'm a capitalist. It's about making money. Yeah. I've got a fund that's going to return me 20x. You're going to promise me, because you can do social impact, you're going to return me 3x. I have a fiduciary responsibility for the money that I'm managing, and I'm looking at an investment that's going to be 5x versus 20x. Guess where I'm going to invest my money? 20x. So I think part of it has to do with just the dynamics of kind of capitalism, and that you're looking to maximize that return on the investment. I think part of it is also the fact that some feel that the role of social good is in traditional places that social good is actually funded. Religious organizations, nonprofits, NGOs, government, philanthropy, that's where it is. So I think these are the two reasons for why it's less. Another factor, because we've actually been running this experiment now, is that the performance on some of those funds has been good. But when you look at the performance of those funds relative to the other ways in which you could be investing money, like professional money managers are saying, the returns aren't quite there, if you're looking to maximize. And so people are kind of following their money. So, but there still are investors that do this. There's some large standing long-term investors, some of them investing out of their philanthropic arms. It's called philanthropic capital or philanthropic VC are kind of doing that. Right. The Chen Zuckerberg Initiative is a good example. The Gates Foundation is another good example of people who've kind of done that in that direction. And then there's other kind of more traditional kind of social impact VC funds or investment groups like the Swan Investor Network that are investing in social enterprises. So those are the reasons why I think it's actually less.
For anyone who's listening, there are venture capitalists there are some venture capitalists that invest in social enterprises, less than more. And it kind of brings up, the question around, because I think what I heard from you is it's a matter of performance. It brings up this this I guess it's like a philosophical thought,
okay.
The values, and I think that we have, and what are we valuing long term? Because I think there are some guests that I've had on the podcast who are doing amazing things. I'll give you an example. There's this one person I interviewed who has this amazing water treatment technology, super revolutionary, can reduce costs by an exorbitant amount. It's future tech, but the challenge with that is it's going to be a long time before it actually returns, right? So then it comes back to this question about when we think about transformative change, there is this like a long-term view about the consequences of continuing to further invest against certain.
Let me pull that in two different directions. The first is, I'm not familiar with the company that you're talking about, so I'm going to talk more broadly about these kinds of technologies. Like, look, I've got this great like widget that will save the world and save people in the world and make them healthier and whatever in a real significant way. What's sometimes difficult in those kind of situations is another factor is what's your competitive advantage?
Right.
And you might sit there and say, well, like, look, like it's 100 times cleaner and it's 100 times faster and it saves 100 times money. It's like, that's all great. I believe you. The challenge is you got other people that also see a similar situation. And so there's other people that are making similar claims. Second, what's your competitive advantage to the current status quo? Like, we've got solutions to clean water.
Right.
We've got solutions to clean air. That status quo is not just the technologies or how people are currently doing it. As one is talking about social impact, and this is true for all other kind of entrepreneurship. There's the additional layer of complexity of government, communities.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, as that dynamic changes, are you still the best solution? And you might say, well, no, my tech makes this great. It's like awesome. But there's another 7 people who've got similar tech. Oh, but they're not as good. They're only 70%. We're 100%. Oh, no, they're not as good. They do this. They're not pure like we are. We do this other thing. That's all great. But they're the ones who have market share and you don't, right? Or they're the ones who've got these relationships with these people and they're at scale and you don't. And so I think you have to understand that yes, the value you're creating can be super impactful, but it's got to be in the context of the current landscape for whatever it is that you're doing. So I don't think it's a values mismatch. I think it's just a sort of widget situation, widget environment, company, current landscape, competitive landscape mismatch in many cases. With regards to value, look, I think everyone wants clean air. I think everyone wants clean water. I think everyone wants a better life for their children and their grandchildren than what they have. I think everyone wants their communities to be healthier, to be more educated, to have greater opportunity and abundance. I don't think the issue is with regards to sort of the values. I think some of it is just the method. I think some of it is the scale. I think some of it is the scope. And sometimes, and I had a difficult conversation with a founder about this earlier this week, it's the team, right? It's like, look, I got this great vision of doing this thing. It's like, cool. And if we can just do this in my neighborhood, like this would be amazing. It's like, awesome. As an investor, what would that look like globally? No, like my focus is my neighborhood. It's like, okay, like there's a mismatch with that opportunity and there's a mismatch with that company and that team with what I see as that kind of large scale go from my perspective. So
gotcha. Yeah.
I don't think it's an aspect of values because I think we're all in agreement about the kind of future we would like to have for everybody. We can disagree as to the degrees. We can disagree as to the levels. We can disagree as to the speed. We can disagree with regards to the priorities. But we all have a vision for a better world in the future than what we currently have. That's called human progress.
Right.
I think that sometimes there's a mismatch that many social impact organizations only feel that social value is the only driver or the preeminent driver that they're creating. And in our current sort of society where you've got other nonprofits that are competing in the same space for nonprofit, non-dilutive grants for operating expenses, when you've got for-profits or investors that are looking to make a return on that investment, that's never enough. It's got to be more. If we think about entrepreneurship, there's 3 levels of fit. The first level of fit is problem solution fit. Does my proposed solution solve the problem? Yes or no? And does it do it well? The next level of fit which is kind of where the rubber really meets the road, is what's known as value proposition customer fit, right? Is the value I'm creating sufficient to where someone will pay me to deliver that value? And that customer could be a nonprofit, it could be an NGO, it could be a government grant, it could be, a contract with a city. That's all awesome. Like those are all great ways, but they're also kind of investors and, corporate customers and stuff like that, or individual customers. It's where the real art and science comes in entrepreneurship, is like really optimizing and ensuring that value proposition customer fit. And once you've got that kind of level of traction, then the question happens is like, where is product market fit with regards to the scale? And I think that many social impact entrepreneurs get stuck with, well, I got a great solution. I've got problem solution fit. It's like, okay, there's the value proposition customer fit, or the customer that you're hoping to target. There's 4 organizations that fund this, and we're all writing, traditional nonprofit grants in that kind of cycle. What's your competitive advantage of your organization over somebody else's? Because not everyone's going to get all the money that they need. There's just not enough money. So I think that we need to be approaching this from the perspective of competitive advantage. And I think, again, the discipline of entrepreneurship education, the kind of things that we've learned in the for-profit space and the venture space can help inform social impact, venture, and entrepreneurs to be better, faster, quicker, more impactful to generate the value they want to create.
I mean, there's an interesting thing there that you said about the three types of fit, and it's been interesting. The people I've had on the podcast so far, they're at that last stage where they've solve the problem, it fits. They've got customers paying, that fits. Now they're in this kind of like, how do I scale this thing? And that's why this question has come up a lot of times, is like, someone just give me some money. Why isn't this a viable venture for a VC? And, that's the question. Like, I think that you've mentioned a few things here about, like, one is, can you prove it fast? Right. But then what is it that takes it from like selling to a few customers to selling at scale? What would be things to look at?
So every situation is unique. So I'm speaking in broad generalities. Your individual mileage may vary. And again, this is just one opinion of one guy. What you need is a real business, a business that can actually scale. So one of the barriers to scale is like, it's not a real business. And what I mean by that is it's not a real scalable business. Like the business model is not scalable or repeatable. In order to scale, you need to have a business model that's repeatable, and you need a business model that can scale. And if like you're the guy and you're the one who's physically like making the things, that's unscalable because you're limited by 24 hours in the day in doing the thing that you do. Or if you have to go and curate and do a custom every single time you execute the thing, that's really, really hard. That's a lot of friction. So like, is the business itself a good business? It's profitable, right? The money that you make is more than the cost you to actually do the thing. And that's all the costs, not just raw costs. And then is it something that's inherently scalable? And do you have a real competitive advantage amongst how other people are doing it? Finally, let's assume you've got all those 3 things in place. Great. Do you have the team? Do you have the expertise? Do you have the vision of building the team that will get you from that, 10 to 100, or that 100 to 1,000, or that 1,000 to 1,000,000 level of scale? Yeah. Because sometimes the team that takes you from 0 to 1 is not the team that takes you from 10 to 1,000,000. And it's difficult as a founder because it's your baby. It's difficult as, the person who built the thing to take it from 0 to 1 or 0 to 10, to realize that you may not be the person who takes it from, 10 to 100. You're Moses, like you're going to see them go off to the promised land and you're not going to be able to enter it. That's that's very difficult for some folks. And it means bringing on people that then can do the work, that can have experience to get to that scale. Or it means if it's going to be you and you're the person who's going to do it, it's like learning that like the business as it was built from 0 to 10 is going to look different than the business that goes from 100 to 1,000,000.
Right.
There are ways in which you can ensure it's the same values, it's the same mission, it's the same goals, the same ways you celebrate, but that team's going to fundamentally look very different. And there's things that you're going to have to deal with, compliance, legal, HR, that just come part of building a larger business. And like, do you have the right team to be able to do that? Or, and if you don't, do you have the skills to be able to attract that team to then get you to that scale? And I'll leave that kind of portion of this question with a great piece of advice entrepreneur friend of mine shared with me. He says, look, it's real simple. You got a simple question, and it's, do you want to be king or do you want to be rich? You can't do both. I think that like the Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg examples, the Steve Jobs are the exception. They're the exception of the people that started from zero and built it to be something massive. That happens, but that's not the rule. I think generally speaking, people are really good for what they can do at a certain level, and you got to bring other people in. And sometimes it means you being like, you know, peace out. Like, I got us to this point. I leave you in good hands. That's part of kind of the challenge with scale, is that you may not have the team to scale. And then we'll get to like the real, where the rubber meets the road, the sort of capital side, the customer side, is like, do you have the customer base to actually scale it? Do you have the profit margins to be able to sustain it? Do you have the actual real business to be this a scalable business? And for many, many, many businesses, super successful businesses, they kind of flat out. They kind of like, you know, flat out, and some years are better, some years are worse. Like, there's got to be a fundamental change to the business or the market or customers in a way that enables you that next level of growth. And for venture scale, we want hockey sticks, man. We're looking for hockey sticks.
Yes.
So that's part of the sort of challenges, is that you're either talking to the wrong investor, fundamentally just don't have a business that can ultimately scale in the way that investors you want. I always give founders is like, go build a real business. Like, go get real customers, go get real revenue, like go grow the business using the revenue of the business to go grow the business. And if it turns out to be something that you need additional capital for, it's a lot easier to get traditional funding if you've got a real business. And if you're interested in venture scale, it's a lot easier if you've got a real business that's got real revenue and got real numbers. So go focus on building a real business, no matter how small it is, no matter what the scale of it is. If you can show that you've been a good steward with your own money, early investor money, in creating value, you've been a good steward in being able to have good management and manage that company, that, yeah, there are other ways in which you can kind of grow that business.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I remember we had this conversation a while back. Just go do it. You know,
Go do it.
And I think that's one of the many traps that founders in general, but also social entrepreneurs, maybe more than most, get into, is like the change the world, boil the ocean kind of play. A much bigger elephant to bite than
It's huge.
And sometimes you just don't go and do it. I think that's one of the big challenges that we have.
You can do it in a very small scale. Show you can do it in your little corner of the universe, the little stamp-sized way in which you can do that. And then, you know, add another stamp and add another stamp and another stamp and kind of grow.
But like you said, that founder you were speaking to earlier today, he doesn't have the ambition to go further than his neighborhood. And I think what I'm seeing a lot of is like this, you know, let's call it hyperlocal kind of view of things. That's just not something that a VC would normally be interested in. No, it needs to be.
But you might have an angel investor who's in that community who is like, yeah, like I came from this neighborhood. I see the value we're trying to create. I'm not looking for a venture scale investment. I don't need a 10x, 20x return on this money. Here's an investment in the business. Go do good for this community and it'll be better for everybody. And, you know, buy me out when it's time to buy me out.
Gotcha. Well, there's so much more to dive into. I want to like finish with these like two questions just that came up, just as like hypotheticals, you know, and talking about theses rather. So we're talking about VC funding, and we're talking about traditional startups versus social enterprises, maybe even nonprofits, you know, and then we're also talking about like values are the same, but maybe we disagree on different things. If you could just imagine, you know, if somewhere down the line in the future, where let's say there's a flip, where VCs are now investing hard into social enterprises. There's more VCs that are doing social enterprises versus traditional for profit. What would you say would cause that shift? Where would their interests change, and I guess why?
I'm completely unqualified to answer that question, so I will do my best to speak out of ignorance. The first is, does it have to be some kind of external factor that would be a motivating force to do that? That external factor could come from government policy with regards to sort of tax write-offs or tax policy, capital gain, encouragement into investment in a particular area. So, maybe there might be some sort of government kind of push towards that reality. A second could be, a really large influential group that says, hey, we see a vision that no one else sees, and we're going to be the lead in that kind of change that we see. And we encourage you all to follow along, because I think we're all going to have a better future. We're all going to make good money. We're all going to see what we see. A third way is that we have some real successes. And we have some real successes, right? I mean, Tom Shoe is one example of a kind of a business model where, I'm selling you a really interesting thing, and in return, those profits go to, go provide shoes for other people. So there are examples of that kind of business model that exists. And we've got some good case examples. Patagonia is another example of social impact, social driven companies, or that have an aspect of social kind of component to do that. So we need to have a lot more sort of, successes in those areas. I do think that in our current kind of political and economic climate, that some of those drivers are no longer kind of being selected for. So I think that it will continue to be a frosty season if we're hoping to see kind of influence in those spaces, certainly here in the United States. Now, that being said, I think that if, some people are not looking for that 20x, and they're perfectly happy with an okay return on that investment that equals or can be less than, a traditional kind of public equity or a bond. Investors follow LP money. Investors follow opportunity. And if there's an overall agreement, hey, people have made enough money, it's okay to do well. Can we do good? And we've got a group and a community of people that are kind of moving that from the investor side as well. So model one was you have a big whale that kind of shifts the space. Model two is you have a whole bunch of other little people that kind of move in the direction and kind of change it in that way. I think that happens. And we're seeing that, and we've seen that in various aspects of the developing world. We've seen that in other communities, hyperlocal, across the country. So we are seeing movements around that in those ways. So those are ways in which I think that could flip. So yeah, is there an opportunity? Yes. Has there always been an opportunity? Yes. Will that opportunity grow in the future? I don't know. To some level, always. And I think it'll ebb and flow. I think, based upon sort of macroeconomic sort of factors, government policy, public sentiment, sometimes it'll be, the thing that people are doing a lot of, and sometimes, it won't be as favored as it would be in other years. So I think you've got to also understand, because if you are interested in long-term impact, 50 years, 100 years impact, these things are cyclical. And as I mentioned before in my own career, sometimes it's a nonlinear path, sometimes it's a nonlinear path. So if you're motivated to do good and do good work, then so good, grow good, and just dig in deep to do that work, because it might be 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It might be a left turn. It might be a right turn. It might be a nonlinear path. It might ebb. It might flow. There are these cycles that occur. You're in it for 50, 100-year transformation. Grow good. Do the work.
Right. And have a few babies that your offspring takes on the
have
charge.
Lots of babies. Have lots of babies.
Yeah. I really appreciate this conversation, Luis. I wonder, before we sign off here, what are some, final pieces of advice or practical things that maybe some social entrepreneurs, enterprises can take from this conversation? I think it would be somewhat established that VC funding may not be the right place to go, or more importantly, find the VC funds that are
Correct.
investing in social enterprises. But let's just say if I'm looking to tap into more of the bigger market as a social enterprise, what are some things that last practical pieces of advice that one could take from this conversation?
Number one, go do it. Build a real business. I mean, go do it. Like, stop talking about it. Like, just actually do it. But I need other people's money in order to build the thing. It's like, cool. Like, you're putting your own money into the deal. Like, I don't come from money, like whatever. It's like, good. Then you got to convince other people, sometimes the people that you know and love, to go ahead and fund your vision. And that's important, because if you as an entrepreneur can't convince someone else to be part of the journey with you, whether they are an investor or whether they are a customer or whether they are a team member, you're never going to convince hundreds of people, millions of people, thousands of people. So work on trying to build it yourself, including your own blood, sweat, and tears and investment, and convincing other people that you're the guy to back on your bold quest to change the world. And like, go do the work. Go do the work. Number one. Number two, understand that what you're signing up for. Like, this is really, really hard. This is like one of the hardest things that you will ever do. And being a startup founder is hard enough. That's like impossibly hard. Being a startup founder that is also driven by some level of social impact, well, congratulations, like, you're on advanced mode at this point. Like, it's really, really hard for some of the reasons we talked about in the pod. So just understand, like, the stakes of what you're this is not for the faint of heart. This is not the known path. Number three, if you haven't learned how to do this, go learn from somebody else. Go join a successful social enterprise. Go see how people are doing the good work in the other ways, whether it's traditional philanthropy or government or whatever. Go get that experience and those chops and that network to learn, well, they do this, we're going to definitely do that over and over again. Or they do that, and I think that's a mistake. We're not going to ever do that. Like, go learn in someone else's organization and building it with them and doing the actual work yourself before you go off and launch your own thing. And so if the path forward for you to do your own thing seems difficult, go find someone else who's paving the way and learn from them, and like, be a part of someone else's team and have that experience and have that credibility and build those reps and build that network and have that proof point. Because what you're doing is super duper hard. Learn from other people and how they're doing the hard thing, the hard lessons that they've learned side by them. That's the third. Number four, you need really good mentors. You need to be surrounded by a community of advisors and mentors and coaches that are committed to your growth, that are committed to your ventures growth, that are committed to the social impact that you want to make. Like, there should be a group in your local community, whether they're an entrepreneurship center or a university entrepreneurship center, that has people that can be helpful to you. And so tap into that. Every university has an entrepreneurship center. Like, you can go to them if you're looking for a place to go. Many communities have entrepreneurship centers or small business centers, or have centers that are focused on nonprofits or social enterprise. Go get help from everyone you can get help with, and surround yourself with top A performers who've been successful in the space, and be coachable. When they tell you, my experience has been, or I suggest that, or perhaps you should look into, either do those things, or if you're not going to do those things, explain why, and then deal with the give and take about, well, I think you should go right. Well, I disagree. I think you should go left. Okay. Well, walk me through why you think left is a better idea, because I'm going to walk you, like, that kind of give and take is really important. So be surrounded by advisors that can help you kind of advise you do that. And then number 5, I think, or 4, whatever number we're on. Surround yourself with a community of other change makers that are also doing the hard work. It's one thing to have advisors. It's a whole different thing to have a group of peers, of other change makers that you can kind of relate to, speak to, share the journey. Because back to what I said with number 2, like what you're doing is really, really hard. And no one really understands what you're doing to the extent of what your goal is unless someone who's been walking in your shoes. So those are the last piece of advice that I'd give folks.
Thanks, Luis. And thank you for acknowledging the difficulty of some of these challenges that
it's really hard.
Some of us crazy people are trying to figure out. But as always, it's there's something else that's driving us, that's for sure. Yeah. But again, thank you for this conversation. Just closing off, where can people find you?
I'm easy to find. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out. I'm the only Dr. Luis Martinez, working at Capital Factory. I'm also on X, the platform previously known as Twitter. So feel free to reach out on socials. As they say, my DMs are open.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm definitely going to DM you some more. I have some more questions after this.
Ask away anytime.
This is a really fun conversation. It actually broke some of my own beliefs about how things work. It has refined some of my own ways of how to approach certain challenges. So again, thank you, Luis. That was Luis Martinez, Senior Ventures Associate at Capital Factory and a leading expert on bridging the gap between hard science and commercial venture. If you're building a social enterprise or wrestling with how to scale impact while staying true to your mission, this conversation is essential. You can connect with Luis on LinkedIn or X, as he just said, and learn more about him at Capital Factory's website, capitalfactory.com. As always, So Good to Grow Good is about scaling solutions that matter, and every story we share plants another seed of change. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep sowing good to grow good.